everybody, Tom here with PC Gamer, and I'm here with Sid Meier. I think you are a man who doesn't need much introduction. Most people know your name, but what's your actual role on games like Beyond Earth and Starship? What do you do in like the day-to-day?
I think of myself as a game designer. On Starships, I was a lead designer. I did a lot of the programming, the AI, the rules, et cetera, et cetera. Beyond Earth was actually designed by Will Miller and Dave McDonough, based on the Civilization engine. And I was there to help them if they needed help, but they took the ball and ran with it. So on some projects, I actually do the programming and design. On others, I'm just kind of hanging around in the building.
And has your role on the Sid Meier games changed over the years? Like, it seems like you started out in programming, but you said you weren't as involved with the programming side of Beyond Earth and Civ 5.
The Sid Meier phenomenon is kind of interesting. I mean, I've had some involvement with all Sid Meier games. I said Civ Meier. That's actually a Freudian slip.
A rebrand there.
Yes. But if a game is based on a system that I designed, for example, Civilization, they still put my name on it, even though I didn't work directly on it.
Gotcha.
Starships is a new game, but it's a game that I programmed and designed, so my name is on that one. XCOM, for example, I didn't design, I didn't program, and my name is not on it. So,
right.
So there is a legitimate connection to the Sid Meier games. Either it's a system I designed, or a series that I started, or a new game that I'm working on.
Did you expect that the Sid Meier name would kind of continue on as this almost brand now?
That was certainly not an expectation back in the early days. People ask me about that, but when we did the original Civ, we weren't planning Civ 2, 3, 4, and 5. We just made a game, and it turned out to be a success, and people wanted more, so we did more of that. Putting Sid Meier was an idea that we first introduced with Pirates. That game did pretty well, so marketing was like, okay, that's working. Let's do that again. Keep doing that. So it's become kind of a brand in a way to represent a certain style of gaming, a certain approach to gaming. I kind of don't identify so much with that Sid Meier. That's the Sid Meier of the past. The Sid Meier that I identify with is the Sid Meier that's working on the next game, but it's another person almost in my life.
Gotcha. And Civ 5 is still one of the most played games on Steam right now. It's constantly got thousands and thousands of people playing with it. What do you, credit its longevity to?
Well, there's a community of Civ players out there that have really kept us going since the original Civilization. I mean, that's been the strength of that franchise, is the players, the fans, the ideas that they've contributed to the series, their willingness to spend those hours and hours playing and creating mods. The community has really been a large part of Civilization, and we're able to kind of give them that one more turn gameplay. That's kind of part of the series, and I think that's kind of what keeps them playing. There's a whole lot of replayability each time you play. Things go off in a different direction. Every world that you play is different. So I think there's enough replayability in that game that even if you played it once or twice or 3 times, eventually you come back to play it again, and that probably contributes to the numbers that we're seeing.
Speaking of the community, have you heard of the 42 Civilization AI-only True Start Battle Royale that's going on right now?
That is something we just heard about a week or 2 ago, and it's apparently taken off on Reddit, and it's really an interesting use of the system to actually have 42 Civs playing totally with the AI, and I understand every Civ has its fans, and if they do well, they're all excited. If they get eliminated, it's a sad day. And the people kind of looking at Civ as a reflection, a mirror of our world, and maybe there's something to be learned that. But the fact that it's kind of almost a spectator sport now is a whole new dimension.
We're going to see Civ 5 as an esport in the future, possibly.
Yeah, you won't actually be able to play it. You just can watch it.
Oh, I see. So why do you think people aren't doing that sort of thing yet in Beyond Earth, when we see it mostly in Civ 5 still? What do you attribute that to?
Well, I think the appeal of this 42 Civ mod is the fact that these are real civilizations, and it's whether it's Poland or Russia or whatever, these are, you can identify with them and have your rooting interest in one Civ or another. And also the fact that you can kind of compare what happens in that game to what happened in actual history and see the parallels and the differences. That's probably part of the fascination. Those things aren't available in Beyond Earth. Beyond Earth, obviously, a science fiction, futuristic game, but I think it's kind of that connection to history that is part of the appeal of this 42 Civ version.
Are you disappointed at all that Beyond Earth kind of hasn't been rallied around with the mod support yet?
I think it's a matter of time. I mean, every game kind of takes a little time to find its strengths and for us to kind of take a look at its weaknesses and deal with those. So Beyond Earth is pretty brand new, and I think it's still finding its place in the world of games.
So how did the idea of linking Beyond Earth and Starships come about?
Well, there are a couple of things that came together to kind of form the momentum for Starships. When I was a kid and I watched the original Star Trek series, and so science fiction has always been kind of a game that I wanted to write. I've never had a chance to really create this kind of future science fiction game. I was kind of watching what was going on with Beyond Earth, and the story there kind of fascinated me, the idea that we had to leave the planet and start a new civilization on a distant world, and go through all the adventures and struggles of creating that civilization and finally succeed and build this new world. But the story stops there in Beyond Earth, and the question for me was, well, what happens after we develop this technology? We have these starships, we can now travel to other worlds. We have all these other people that left the Earth. What happened to them? What's their story? So Beyond Earth kind of picks up at that point, and where you finished civilizing a new planet, and you can now travel to other worlds and discover the adventures that await you on those different planets. The other thing that really was kind of motivational was our artists got very excited when I talked about the possibility of science fiction. It's like, oh, science fiction, yeah, that's our favorite genre. We can create whatever cool art we want to and let our imaginations run wild. So that all kind of came together to become the impetus for Starships.
How much is, because each of the kind of factions or affinities in Beyond Earth at least have a very distinct look to them. How much of that is art feeding into design and design feeding into art, if you understand, like game design that is?
I think the story of Beyond Earth sets out the parameters of the factions, the supremacy with their kind of mechanistic look, the harmony, the tree huggers of the future, purity is kind of, you know, keep humanity pure. And that drove some of the initial art ideas, and then we kind of turned our artists loose to create, you know, very organic forms for the harmony and these kind of hard edges for supremacy, and they took those ideas and just kind of ran with them. So I think it's an interaction, it's a synergy between design and our artists.
How are the games actually interconnected gameplay-wise? I know there was a patch very recently with Beyond Earth that added some connectivity, but we didn't quite hear what that was yet.
Right. Just to be clear, they're separate games, playable separately. You can play Beyond Earth and not play Starships, or you can play Starships and not play Beyond Earth. And Starships is actually not a, quote, civilization game in terms of the classic format. It's a new design, but there are some interesting connections between the two games. So one of them, for example, if you're playing a Beyond Earth game and you boot up Starships, you'll see an extra button on the start screen which says Start from Beyond Earth, in which case the same leaders that are leading civilizations in Beyond Earth will appear in your Starships game. If they're at war in Beyond Earth, they'll also be at war in Starships. If there's an alliance, the alliance will continue into Starships. Whatever affinity they have in Beyond Earth, they'll carry that forward to Starships. So you can almost think of that as the next chapter in the story. You can combine Beyond Earth and Starships into one super epic game if you want to, or you can play them separately and have just that kind of an experience.
Do you think we'll see more of those small kind of interconnected games with different aspects that you maybe can't explore in the Civ franchise proper?
It's possible. I think we were, by building on what Beyond Earth had created, we were able to create a whole new game with a somewhat smaller team in a quicker time frame. So there's an efficiency to doing that. But the amount of game design and gameplay that we put into Starships, I think, rivals any other game that's out there. But the focus for us was creating that game, and by stealing and borrowing other resources, we were able to put it together very efficiently.
Are you worried at all that the fact that it's both a cheaper game and has a mobile version might give PC gamers the wrong impression about what it is?
Well, that's why I'm here today, to give them the right impression. No, I just want to be clear. It's a strategy game that it was a game we wanted to make, and there were no compromises based on platform or performance. I mean, this is the game we wanted to make. We created a brand new engine. to support the special effects, kind of spacey special effects that we wanted, some neat weapons trails. There's all sorts of cool stuff. Our engine runs on PC and iPad. It was a multi-platform engine, and it's a single price. There are no microtransactions. There's none of that funny stuff in the game. Just want to assure people, because I know there's concerns when you talk about other platforms. But it is a hardcore, medium to hardcore PC strategy game. But if you're not at your PC, you might want to play it on your iPad.
I'm just going to put my pitch in for a Pirates game connected into Civ 6. You can take that idea.
All right, I'll make a note of that.
So one of the big hot topics that was at GDC has been VR, and everybody's kind of going into this VR space, but it seems like top-down strategy might get left behind a little bit in that trend. What do you think top-down strategy's place is in this VR wave that's coming?
I think that's a good question. We have to yet see how that's going to work out. I think there are other genres clearly that are more suitable for the first wave of VR products. Anything first person, etc. But it's incredibly immersive. It's a really interesting technology. You can certainly see ways that it can be applied to strategy gaming, but I think it's probably not the most obvious or the initial application for VR.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that VR will just kind of leave it in the dust, though, or do you think that strategy games have room to adapt, I guess?
Strategy is not going to be left in the dust. There are so many committed strategy gamers out there that I don't have no concern about a strategy being left in the dust. I think we've always been able to take advantage of the new technology when it was appropriate. We're just at a very early stage, I think, right now in VR. The initial prototypes and test kits are going out there, and it's pretty revolutionary. It's pretty new, and I think we're going to need some time to understand the advantages and disadvantages and see how they relate to the kind of games that we make.
So we went from squares to hexes. I'm trying to think what the next VR step would be in that, but I can't figure it out. Another trend that's been popular in PC gaming right now has been the rise of early access, especially early access on Steam. What are your opinions about early access and that kind of development model?
I think it's an interesting development. As a designer, we're always looking for as much input and feedback as we can get, especially early in the design phase. So, in that sense, it could be a very valuable mechanism. I think the concern is that the old saying, you only get one chance to make a first impression, is at what point do you put a product out there, and how do you create the right set of expectations for that product? If you put something out there that's broken or not up to standard, that's the impression you're leaving with people. But that's also the time when possibly the most valuable design input is available. So we're kind of walking that tightrope between wanting to put out earlier to get input at a point where we can integrate it more quickly in the design process, but we have a pretty rough-looking game, and we're going to leave that kind of negative impression. So it's something that is evolving. We have actually our own internal design testing group called Frankenstein, which is a bunch of people that are just Civ fanatics, and they kind of serve the role of early access testers, but they are kind of within the fold, and they're not supposed to come in on the game, etc. So as a mechanism for getting quality early feedback, I think it's a great tool. But it doesn't come without some strings attached, and those are the considerations that are really part of our thinking as far as early access.
Would you ever see a situation where you would want to use early access as a model, or does that first impression, is it just not worth it to you?
I would love to use it as a model, but in a way, because we're Firaxis, perhaps the expectations are a little higher. And most people haven't seen our prototypes and our internal development halfway through a project, and it might be kind of a shock to them that not everything works. So I think that's really the decision that we have to make on a case-by-case basis, is what value are we going to get from the feedback, and what's the risk in terms of showing something that's not complete, that's not 100% where we want it to be.
looking forward, what would you want to see in either Beyond Earth expansion content or even a Civ 6? The jump from, like I said, squares to hexes was a big thing in the Civ universe. What would be the next step for Civ?
Finally, the world is safe for hexes. It's ironic you mentioned that, but in the original Civ, I had intended to put hexes in there, but in those days, strategy was kind of like a dirty word as far as games were concerned. And it was like, no, you know, if you put hexes in there, it's going to remind people of all those complicated war games with, you know, take hours to set up, etc. So we went with squares with the original Civ, and finally it has become safe to actually use hexes in games. I think that, you know, to answer your question, that's really the fact that we take a little bit of time between the iterations of our game, and usually it's 4 or 5 years between Civ releases, allows us to make some interesting advances. I mean, I think each version of Civ, whether it's hexes or 1 unit per tile or religion, or there, you know, I think we've been able to kind of find that balance of how many new features are going to make the game fresh for players, but how much of the core stuff do we retain to keep it playable, familiar, and the same quality of experience that people are expecting. I think it continues to be that kind of a challenge. You know, what can we add to the game to add some freshness to it, but what do we keep? And you know, we'll continue to kind of really focus on that as we look at future products and imagining that we might make another Civ game or another Beyond, or whatever we might be working on. We take that approach to deciding what's going to be in it.
So looking forward at games that you are not making, what are you kind of excited for this year in terms of PC games?
I love racing games, so anything in the racing genre I kind of look forward to. And then anything innovative. I mean, most of the games that I've played in the last couple of years have kind of come out of left field, and, you know, Minecraft probably being the leading example. But there's a ton of innovation out there, so it's probably some game I'm not even anticipating. It's some indie designer or whatever is going to kind of come up with some really clever new games. So those are the kind of things I'm looking forward to.
So where can people go to hear more about Sid Meier's Starships? Starships was just released on March 12th. It's available on Steam for the PC and the Mac. It's also available for iPad at the iTunes Store. It's $14.99. There are no in-app purchases. That's all you need to pay. Check our website as well, and there's some special deals also available. Great. Well, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thanks for having us.
Hey everybody, Tom and Wes here with the Q&A portion of the PC Gamer Show, where we take your questions from Facebook, Twitter, our YouTube page, our website, and our Steam group on whatever's on your mind in PC gaming this week. Wes, what's our first question this week?
Our first question is from PC Gamer. User Zaphis wants to know, what do you make of the future of the RTS genre?
That's a big question, and it's one also that I think when I talked to Sid Meier, he got into a little bit about what the future of strategy is. I think it's good. I think we're seeing a lot more RTSs specifically come out nowadays, with like Grey Goo was very well received and stuff like that, and I think that it might be on the rise for a little bit of a comeback. It kind of petered out a little, and I think it'll be okay.
I hope so. All right, second question.
And our other question is from Twitter, from @CurdleSanders, is what kind of games do you want for the Oculus Rift?
Personally, I want to see the hardware come out first, and then obviously you're going to need a good game to kind of help sell the hardware. But I think the really interesting VR experiences aren't going to happen until just people have VR headsets in their hands, good hardware that they can play around with, and come up with genuinely new games that are just different than what we're used to playing. Because games that you just kind of try to shoehorn into VR, whether it's first-person shooter, exploration game, platformer, they just don't quite work the same way. So we're just gonna have to come up with new stuff basically to really take advantage of VR.
Yeah, I agree. I really want to see new things. I don't want to just see first-person shooters with a VR headset only. That seems like a waste of the technology almost.
Definitely.
So if you have any questions for us or things you wished we asked Sid Meier, put them in the comments below. Hit us up on Twitter and Facebook with the hashtag AskPCGamer, and we'll take them next week. See you then.